What's going on, y'all? It's Asante Haughton, mental health advocate. I guess, my name appears to precede me these days, but I don't really like to toot my own horn that much. That being said, I do a lot of work in mental health, and, recently I've been talking a lot about mental health and race. And I think that's a really important thing to focus on because when we talk about race and racism, I think sometimes we don't always think about the mental health impacts of racism. And an analogy I like to use to think about this subject and this topic is look at my hair, man. I need to, pandemic, need to do better. But an analogy I like to use to think about this subject is imagine living in an abusive household. Every time you go home, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to run into abuse that day. You may not run into abuse most days, but because you know that abuse might happen, there's still going to be that fear and that anxiety. And I really want to focus on the anxiety aspect because what that does is it puts your brain in constant overdrive, worrying about what might happen. Now, that over time has, what we say, deleterious effects. Essentially, what that means is it's going to have a negative effect that accumulates over time. Which is going to impact your mental health. Now, if you are an oppressed person, whether you're oppressed based on race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, whatever it may be, essentially, you are living in the abusive household that we call society, right? So every time you walk out into a world or a space that is not safe for you, there is the potential for you to experience harm. And because of that, there is that, again, that accumulated effect of not knowing if something bad is going to happen to you every single time you are in a space that is not safe, essentially a space that is not your home or filled with people of the same identity. So, with that being said, it becomes very clear that, you know, in that way, racism could have a huge impact on someone's mental health. Another thing you might want to look at is thinking about things like depression. Now, there are a lot of different reasons as to why depression happens or occurs. But if you are consistently, struggling, there is a higher, chance that you are going to experience depression. Now, if you are someone who's experiencing racism, now you may have fewer opportunities because of growing up in a system that does not support you in a variety of different ways. Because you have fewer opportunities, you may have, less income or, live in situations or circumstances that have poorer health outcomes. You may not be able to afford to have, stronger health outcomes. You may not be able to afford, a multivitamin. You may not be able to afford to run to the store to grab some medicine if you're sick. You may not be able to afford to, eat the healthiest of food, or maybe you have to choose between food groups. I know that's how it was for me growing up. It was never I could never have all four food groups at the same time. I had to choose between them, right? And usually, you're choosing meat and you're choosing grains because, in many ways, by the pound, those are the cheapest. So when you think about things like that, again, there is an impact that racism has on quality of life, and lower quality of life is definitely correlated with higher levels of stress, and higher levels of stress are correlated with depression and a whole variety of other mental health challenges. So when you look at things like that, again, it becomes, I think, for me, clear that race and mental health are very much intertwined when we talk about racism. Now, another thing maybe I want to say here is that racism, sometimes we think about it through a lens that defines racism as things that are very, very overt or very, strong, or things that present themselves as, oh, you called someone the N-word, or you beat someone up because of the race that they are, or things like that. But there are so many subtle ways that racism can impact people in society. You see these things in school when there's a kid who doesn't get as much attention as the other kids, so they don't have as much opportunity to be mentored and nurtured and learn. You might see this in a workplace where a boss or a supervisor might feel they have more in common with someone from the same identity group as them, so they give them more of an opportunity in meetings to speak, which then is really giving them more of an opportunity to show their stuff and how skillful they are, so they progress and move up the ladder. So there are a lot of different ways in which racism is expressed that has an impact on the world, or on people who are subjected to racism. Even using the two examples I just talked about, with school and the workplace, the examples I used are things that can cause, can impact people's opportunities. And again, going back to what I was saying earlier, less opportunity might mean less income, might mean poorer health, might mean more stress, might mean more mental health challenges as a result. So I don't want to say too much right here, but I think it is important that we do get really critical about what the mental health impact of race and racism is in our society, because if we ignore it, then what we are doing is we're allowing this problem to perpetuate itself. And if we do that, what are we really doing? We're not making change happen. And I think what we've all discovered, or maybe some of us didn't have to discover it. I didn't have to discover it because I've been living it my whole life. But I think what some people have discovered over the past year is just how deeply racism is ingrained in so many aspects of our society. And now we're finally pulling back the curtain to make change happen. But in order to make change happen, we need to actually see the problems. So let's do that. Let's look deep, let's reflect. Let's do it without insulting each other. Let's do it without, throwing judgment at each other. Let's really try to solve the problem together. Because I think, for me personally, that's the only way that we move forward. We all have a responsibility to make this problem disappear for the good of our society and for the good of our mental health. So hopefully you take that with you. This is me, Asante Haughton. You can find me on Twitter at AsanteV, Instagram at Asante Talks, and probably in a lot of different places. I'm doing a lot of things these days. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it, and I hope you have a great day, a great evening, whatever it is that you want to have a great one of. Have it, and we'll talk soon. Peace.